Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Carol Fabrizio, Chief Communications and Marketing Officer for USA Gymnastics. We are honored to host this panel today. It's the second in our series on diversity, equity, inclusion in gymnastics. The first is recorded and is available in full on our website if you didn't get a chance to see that before. These panels are part of our commitment to create a community and a culture of safety in gymnastics, one that is both welcoming and diverse, but also inclusive and equitable. We want to use the platforms that we have to help build awareness and understanding by listening to the athletes, coaches, club owners, judges, and others in our community. So that's why we're here today, to hear these incredible panelists tell their story. So during the panel for the next hour, if you have questions or things you want to hear from the panelists on, please feel free to use the Q&A function, and we'll try to work those into the conversation. So we're going to start with introductions, and then I will turn it over to Dr. Keith Harrison, our returning moderator, to manage the conversation today. So with that, Darren, would you mind starting the introductions?
Sure. So my name is Darren Moore. I am the founder of In-Flight Gymnastics and Circus, and also Brown Girls Do Gymnastics. My gymnastics journey started when I was about 5 and ended as far as a gymnast at 14. I started cheering. And in college, I actually was a bit depressed because I did so many sports when I was in high school and just kind of stopped, like it was just school. And so I started coaching as an outlet to not be depressed anymore, just to get back into something that was like team oriented. I started coaching at a gym called New Orleans East. It was a super small gym. I walked in, they were all Black girls. I had never seen that before. And so I fell in love with the sport all over again through them. And I dedicated my gymnastics career to serving underserved youth or underserved communities with gymnastics. Through coaching gymnastics, I started coaching acrobatics for a circus camp. And in the circus camp, there was a clown actually that recommended me for Cirque du Soleil's outreach called Cirque du Monde. So I started doing circus or training circus through Cirque du Soleil, definitely not performing for Cirque du Soleil, but their training. So I went to Montreal and Mexico City, all over the US training with Cirque du Soleil to coach youth. And that is where I am now. Thank you guys for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Darren. Jeffrey?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Brown. I am originally from Kansas City, Missouri. I was a competitive trampoline and tumbling athlete for 14 years. I was on national teams from 2001 all the way through 2009. I was on both junior and senior national team and went to 2 world championships in both 2007 and 2009. After my athletic career, I moved to Orlando, Florida, and I was a performer for Disney World, Universal, SeaWorld, and Cirque du Soleil. And after a pretty big injury and actually a hip replacement, I went back to coaching and got a call from Spring, Texas. And I have now been in Spring, Texas at World Champions Center as the trampoline and tumbling head coach at World Champions Center. So this is where I am for the last 2.5 years, and I am very, very excited to be here to speak on this topic.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeffrey. Jessica?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Renteria. I identify myself as a woman of color. I'm African American, and I'm also Latina, Mexican descent. My father is Mexican, and my mother is African American. I have been part of gymnastics basically my whole life. I have also done acrobatic gymnastics competed in 11 years, representing the junior and senior national teams at the World Cups and at the World Championships. My partner and I, her name was Maren Merworth. She and I, we are the first senior U.S. women's pair to medal at a World Cup event. And so we are very grateful for that. Also, I have been a part of acrobatic gymnastics even beyond after as an athlete. As a clinician, I hosted clinics, I have done choreography, and I've coached for a little bit. And also, I am the part of the Athlete Council on USA Gymnastics as the Athlete Council Vice Chair. So working with USA Gymnastics and continuing to represent our athletes in the best way possible. So I'm really proud to be a part of this amazing group of the Athlete Council. And more than anything, I'm just so excited to be here, and I'm excited to share my part of the story. Recently, I just graduated from Texas Christian University. As I just recently graduated in bachelor's in sports psychology and continuing my education with my master's in kinesiology and sport, with special emphasis in sport and exercise psychology. So I would love to continue to work in that field and also use my experiences to help others and to really push forward sports psychology. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Jessica. Lori?
Hi, I'm Laura Hernandez. I've been doing gymnastics for about 13 years now. I was part of the Final Five team in 2016, and I am currently training for Tokyo in 2021. I'm Puerto Rican. Both my parents were born in New York. My grandparents born in Puerto Rico. I'd identify as Afro-Latina, but there's a privilege because my skin is lighter, but we can talk about that later. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I love gymnastics. I'm pretty open and focused and find very important the conversation over mental health and making sure that we remove the stigma and that we're taking care of ourselves as much as we take care of other people. And yeah, my mom's a social worker. My sister's a therapist. So I grew up with that in the house, and outside of gymnastics, it's something that I find really important.
Awesome. Thanks, Lori. Orson?
Hi guys, my name is Orson Sykes. I own Twist and Shout Training Center. It's a tumbling and competitive cheerleading training center. I grew up a gymnast from Memphis, Tennessee. After graduation, attended the University of Oklahoma as a gymnast. Was fortunate enough to be on the 1991 national championship team. Was a conference champion on vault, and you know, I also served as a kind of a grad assistant there at OU for a couple of years, and eventually just got into coaching. Started coaching tumbling and cheerleading, and you know, just excited to be here. You know, obviously gymnastics is really one of my first loves, and I'm just extremely excited to be here and excited to be a part of the conversation.
Great. Thanks, Orson. And Dr. Harrison?
Thank you so much. First, I want to give a shout out to three leaders at USA Gymnastics, Lee, Lauren Turner, and last but not least, Carol Fabrizio. When you think of the context of today's panel, often, and I'm thinking about the Masters coming up, kind of the energy around, you know, all these things being reassigned in COVID, but they're showing all these memories of Tiger Woods. And I feel like we as Americans were cheated. At least I did not know about this great group that I'm going to moderate. You know, a baller is labeled usually as a football or basketball player, and we know culturally it means someone that performs at the highest level. What a great group that we're going to hear from today. So, in the spirit of what you all have overcome and excelled in this sport, can you all talk a little bit about how USA Gymnastics and the related other activity areas have been historically homogeneous and not as heterogeneous? And so, in other words, how has gymnastics become more diverse and inclusive over time when we think about 2020 and we reflect in the rear view mirror?
Can I put it? I think over time, thankfully, the representation has grown even more, and especially with the Final Five having two Black girls, a Hispanic girl, a white girl, a Jewish girl, all of that representation is so important, not just for kids, but for the globe to see. And I think that's why the whole planet loves the Olympics, because it's not just gymnastics, it's not just the United States, but it's the whole world that's coming together over sports that they're passionate about. And there's unity in that, and there's unity in the fact that we're all completely different, whether that's sports, race, height, you know, whatever it is, we're all completely different, and we're coming together for this one thing that we have loved for ages. And having the whole world watch that, and having the whole world watch us be passionate and watch us stick up for each other, is very important, but especially for the little kids. And in terms of race, being able to see somebody that looks like you kind of opens up this little door in your brain that says like, oh, okay, like she, he, they look like me. That means I can do it too.
No, Lori, your point about the diversity, I watched every bit of the 2016 performance because I love the diversity of representation in addition to you all just kicking massive butt. Who else would like to follow Lori on that? How far have we come with D&I, as we say as educators in the field? Jeffrey, you raised your hand.
Yes, I agree with, I 100% agree with Lori. You know, I'm a little bit older than Lori, so I didn't always see, you know, athletes that look like me, especially in a discipline that isn't widely known. You know, when I told people I did gymnastics, they automatically were like, oh, you do the rings, oh, you do the floor exercise, oh, you do this. So there's a whole nother conversation about trampoline and tumbling and what that is and how it's different. And, you know, I had very few, you know, athletes to look to and, you know, and say, okay, I want to be just like them because they look like me. So I found the inspiration elsewhere, and I still grew up with a great group of athletes, but it's great to see more athletes of a more diverse, you know, grouping to, you know, inspire more and more athletes and young people to come in the gym, whether that be to be competitive or just as a recreational, you know, activity. It's so much more positive. And I think the more that we see that in our sport, it's just going to make it grow the way it currently is and has been for many, many years.
From this process that Jeffrey, you made the point about where you look for inspiration. Would everyone on the panel agree that someone, either the lack of representation inspired you, or you did have that image? Curious, anyone want to address that?
I will address that. I think the lack is definitely what inspired me as far as coaching. As far as gymnastics is concerned, I think what happens with gymnastics is we tend to look at the Olympics or we look at elite. And so it looks like we are diverse, or it looks like the sport is diverse. But when you like peel that back and you look at like recreational gymnastics or even collegiate gymnastics, like some people don't even know that there's collegiate gymnastics, you know? And there are schools, universities, large universities with no Black people on the team at all, you know? So I feel like we've come along, and I know I'm going back to the other question. We've come a long way, but there's some that we still need to go, if that makes sense. For me, go ahead, sorry.
No, Darren, go ahead, finish the point. I just had a follow-up.
For me, like I had an older cousin that did gymnastics. And so I had somebody like literally in my family, but she was like the only other Black person that I saw in the gym. So it's, you know, there's lack for sure, but there's also, I saw it, but there's that lack that made me want to do it more.
So Darren, one of the hot button questions that I'm gonna throw at you, because it's so important that we have this conversation in this country, because some people will say, well, why do you have to call it Black girls do gymnastics? Can you address that? I mean, clearly you wouldn't exclude anyone that wants to do gymnastics.
Right.
I've met you and can see your heart and passion, but can you address why labeling it that helps with this very question that we started the panel out with today?
Yeah, it's amazing. There's two things I want to, when USA put this out on social media, I don't know if you guys looked at the comments, they're vile. I mean, they're bad. When I say brown girls do gymnastics, and we say brown for a reason, like we want to include all of the brown folks. So Lori and Jessica and me, all of the brown people who you just don't see. And I feel like sometimes when white folks look at, like we've definitely had people say like, well, why you're racist because you've named it Brown Girls Do Gymnastics. We're definitely not racist. We've had white coaches come to our conferences and the whole nine, but it is necessary for us to say out loud that we do gymnastics and be proud of that.
The de facto is white is typically the status quo. It reminds me when I taught at Washington State, about 5 of white female students, a couple white males, they're like, Doc, you tell us to embrace diversity, but Keith Sweat says I need a chocolate girl. I said, well, he's just trying to highlight that that's his particular preference because the assumption in other songs and media images, but I'm glad we're talking about it openly because we know it relates to Black Lives Matter, which is another discussion. And some people are not intellectually and culturally aware of why these outreaches and interventions are done. So thank you, Darren, for addressing. I don't know if anyone had anything to follow that. Go ahead, Laura.
I'll follow in the sense of, I didn't really see anybody who looked like me growing up in gymnastics, but I didn't see it as a barrier. And I think in relation to what Darren said earlier, I have 2 older siblings, an older sister, our age gap is by 11 years, an older brother, our age gap is by 4. And just seeing them, you know, go to college and do their own thing, whether it was in sport or whether it was in school. I saw 2 people going after something and chasing it, and they were so ambitious, and that was my representation. And so in relation to the gymnastics community, in making the 2016 team, it had been, I think it's like over 30 years since a US born Latina had made the team. And that's just too long. That's a really long time. And it was really interesting being at Olympic trials and making the team and kind of hearing all the other girls and just everybody who competed get the question of like, how did it feel to compete? And then my question was always like, how does it feel to be the first US Latina, like in over, you know, X amount of years. And so for it to be such a long time, I didn't realize it. But I felt really honored that I got to, you know, hopefully be that representation for kids out there. And the more representation, the better. I don't want to like cap it for any spot. Everybody that we can put in there, especially brown girls and brown boys and brown kids, you know, any representation we can get is so important. And yeah, that was really interesting. I remember seeing Maddie Larson go out and compete, and she had these beautiful curls. And I remember sitting at home watching her at nationals and pointing to the screen and going, Mommy, she's my favorite. And Mom was like, okay, why is she your favorite? And I was like, because she looks like me. And she just like, you know, looking back now, I can tell she had like this little warm feeling in her heart of like, okay, I like, that's my kid type of thing.
And now others are doing that when they see you, Lori. That's got to be so fulfilling. Before we move to the next category, implicit bias and experiences that you all have had with that, Carol, did you want to go to the questions from the audience?
Sure. There's one question that's kind of related to part of what we're discussing now, which is especially for young girls of color. What do we say to them? How do we encourage them to stay in the sport and enjoy it and be as happy and competitive as they want to be in the sport without as much representation as we might otherwise want?
I can definitely speak to that because I know for me from the gym where I came from, there was a lot of representation when it comes to the Latino community. And so for me, that was something that was close to me, at least at my gym that I've seen. When it comes to being African American, I barely saw that, and not until I got into the other competitions. And one of the things I just want to say is that continue to push forward. And even though it seems really hard and it seems like you're the only one, as you can see on this panel, you're not the only one. And just want to continue to encourage you to pursue your goals, focus on what you love to do, and continue to also, have these conversations. If this is something that is truly bothering you, then it's okay to reach out to others as well, because I guarantee you they're probably on the same boat as well. And so this was something that I really struggled with for a long time, and I had to learn how to accept it. And that's something that was within my sport with acrobatic gymnastics. And now the diversity is growing, and and I'm starting to see that more as I am the athlete representative more than I did as an athlete. So just to see Black girls, brown girls, or just people of color on the floor, it's just really truly inspiring. And so that is something that we just have to continue to stay positive and not focus too much on the negative.
Great. So, and this is good with the interaction. 3 questions have come in all related to SES. And this is one of the areas I've dedicated my career and life to. And so I want to frame it like this. Economics is one variable.
Yeah.
But what we find in the studies of why youth participate in sports is money is not even in the top 3. Yeah. It's imagery, what you all are talking about, popular culture. To you great panelists, can you all address beyond socioeconomic status? Folks are asking, how do we get diverse populations involved? Because I want people to know, and there's 59, I'll just use these 2 ethnic groups. There's 59 Latinx folks in America and over 44 million African-American or Black Americans, and a minimum of close to 50% of them are close to middle class. So I want people to know, because I'm real passionate, it's not just the money. Can you all address some of the other factors, why they don't participate or why they do?
Well, can I say, let me, coming up in my neighborhood, we just tumbled. That was just kind of the culture in my neighborhood.
Yes.
One summer I went to a camp. It wasn't a tumbling camp, it was just a summer camp. Part of that summer camp was a gymnastics class. I could do everything they were trying to teach. And that teacher said, hey, you should go to a gymnastics place. Well, that's what I did. Now that place was a half-hour away in the suburbs. Some of my friends, a lot of my friends that were actually better, they just couldn't do that. They didn't have the finances to do that. Not to mention, where I came up, basketball, football, those things were more prevalent,
Yes.
I had never even really seen a gymnast, much less a Black gymnast. It was completely foreign to me. Granted, I had a love for gymnastics when I got in it. It really helped once I saw people like Charles Lakes, Ron Gallimore, people that looked like me doing it. You know what I'm saying? So I think gymnastics needs to find maybe out of the box areas to introduce the sport to people that maybe that it may not, the prevalent sport may be basketball and football in that area, as it was in my area. And I think it would help again if gymnastics maybe push their sport in other out of the box areas.
I 100% agree with Orson. I grew up, very similarly. I was in a suburban area when I grew up for most of my life, but I had family, in the inner city areas and went to summer camps and stuff. And I mean, some of these guys were doing stuff that I wouldn't dream of doing on concrete or in the grass, whatever, but it was the traveling and it was the, the economics, but also it's a social thing. In the Black community, I actually started as a dancer and did tumbling through dance. And that's where I found out that I had this talent. And then I, found the love through watching, the Olympics. And it was hard for me. I wanted to quit a bunch of times because I got teased, I got made fun of, I was soft, I was gay. I mean, I'm a proud gay Black man now, but, back then it was very, very hard to, stay the course with something that I truly loved because of a social factor. So, tagging on to what Orson said, we need to get it into some different areas, but also give it some pizzazz or, make it, show the strength that comes with, gymnastics, for men and women, because it really is something that is special and that there is a lot of untapped talent that we could definitely get to.
Great nuggets. Darren, to end the topic before we move on, I know you want to.
Yeah, the gymnastics is an elite sport, not just elite as far as skill. It's one of those things that fancy people do it, And so by design, gymnastics is just not something that is in a Black neighborhood. That neighborhood might have money, but because it's not white. And so you don't put a gym in a Black neighborhood. You just don't. And then when you have things that play against that, in USA, and I think USA is great. I think USA is the mama of the governing bodies. But there are these fees that are just across the board the same, if USA had something in place that small gyms didn't have to pay whatever it is per gymnast for a sanctioned competition, you know what I mean? So that gym can grow in that space. Then that would be something that could help gymnastics grow in those communities. But they're just all of these things that are stacked against why you wouldn't put a gymnastics center in a Black community. One last thing, and I'm gonna stop because I'll talk about this all day. This is like the thing that I talk about the most. One of the moms that I just spoke to drives an hour to take her daughter to gymnastics. And it's not just that she obviously can afford it, but she also has to have a job that allows her to do that. You know, like we've had girls in our program that their moms were doctors and dad lawyer. I mean, it looks like the Cosby Show, you know? But if their mom works until 5 p.m., you can't get your kid to gymnastics at 3:30, you know, not if it's an hour away. So there's just all these things that are stacked against it. And you're right, it's so not money. Black people have money.
No, Darren, thank you. So let's talk about all of you overcame overt barriers. And I'll share a short anecdote. You know, as professors and intellectuals, particularly of color, and we have mainstream allies that are white, but we have this saying that when we start out intellectually, whether it's the classroom, getting published, we start at an F. And whereas white mainstream started at A and worked their way down versus we have to work our way up. That's a way of saying that your competence will come into question. So I would love the 5 of you to share any perspective on how microaggressions, subtle, insidious, you know, aggressive behavior that impacts you. It's like a faucet dripping. We talked about it last time. Can you all talk about how you felt microaggressions, either from judging, teammates, structurally, within? I mean, there's self-hatred at time, which Jeffrey talked about, where, you know, getting teased because, you know, you're soft, stereotypes. If you all could just keep it 100 and go there on microaggressions, implicit bias. Yes.
Yes, that's something that we just cannot ignore. It is there, and that is called unconscious bias. And unconscious bias is something that with judgments and behaviors, and it's something that it's towards others that we're not aware of. I think that is mostly prevalent in everywhere. It is everywhere. Particularly. And so this is something that has to definitely be addressed. And I have not seen it as much as an athlete. It's like when you're a coach or you're a judge or just even, you know, for me as an athlete representative, I have seen that when it comes to the judging within my sport. And the first step is just recognizing and recognizing and accepting that we all have bias. I think that's the first step with that. The second is like developing like different tactics on like how to make decisions that are more conscious and to how to like reorganize the thinking structure. Like, because I think some people trust their gut, but that's not always the best, as we can see, whether it is seeing that other person or that activity or that thing. And this is definitely prevalent in gymnastics, and it could be the coaching, reviewing a performance, or we just said judging. And so one of the things I feel is like we have to hold ourselves accountable and hold the people around us accountable as well. And that is something that is really hard to like hold others accountable because we don't want to hurt that person's feelings, but it is also hurting the other person, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And so continuing to educate yourself and to know like, okay, like this is something, yes, I do it, we all do it, this unconscious bias, and it is real and it is out there.
Thank you, Jess.
I would say that, I mean, obviously you're dealing with people and people are fallible. So, you know, there are going to be some unconscious bias. I think, you know, too, sometimes those things are just because, you know, when you're Black and you come into an environment where it's the majority culture, it's white, some white people just have never been around one Black person. So they may say things, maybe not meaning to be disrespectful or insensitive. They just haven't been around enough Black people to understand that, hey, you can't say that. That's insensitive. And that's not just athlete, but sometimes that's coach as well, you know. I think, and so, you know, I mean, so I've seen that on a few occasions, you know what I'm saying? By and large, though, I mean, I think my experience has been, you know, positive. I appreciate, you know, being in environments where I was able to learn and be around different cultures. I think has made me a better person. It's amazing to watch, um, you know, the Fantastic Five and, you know, how many people of color, you know, back when I was doing gymnastics, that was never, I couldn't imagine seeing that many women of color on the stand like that. That being said, we still have much work to do.
Yes, and it's someone that put up a comment. How do we feel about, you know, racist comments put up in response to different things USAG is saying? And literally, Orson, as you said that, I just typed this PhD student who asked, well, how do we feel about it? I said, DE&I is tough work. Like this is work we have to roll up our sleeves. Any other thoughts on implicit bias?
Yes, I think it's important to remember that, you know, especially as we look at Black Lives Matter and how, you know, Black people have had to deal with, or, you know, people of color really have had to deal with, you know, different microaggressions just in life. It's important to remember that we are also taught that we have to be somewhat on guard. We always have to be on guard for, you know, you may get treated like this, you may get treated like that, you may hear these things, you know, be on guard for that. But also this feeling of that we have to be more or better, or, you know, stand out more in a brighter way, just to be recognized on the same level. So coming in to, you know, again, a sport where you don't see a lot of people like you, and you're uncomfortable, other people are uncomfortable with you being there because they don't know much about people of color. It just adds another level to the stress, the training that we've all gone through and the hours that we put in. And sometimes we view things and we say, oh, that's bias. That is 100% bias. I feel attacked. And I know personally, like, I had to fight against that and not let that take away from, my shine and, going out there, giving my best performances. But it's tough. And I think that sometimes that's not recognized, that we kind of deal with that on that level as well. As, I'm hoping that my other panelists, can sort of identify with. And it's something that you've had to, work through on top of everything else that comes along with being a competitive gymnast. So
Excellent.
That's kind of, yeah.
Excellent stuff. Just to tie this in, we're going to move to intersectionality, which is racism and sexism. And we've had a parent, I believe, yes, from the Q&A that wants to know what is the panelists, our fantastic five, okay, the panel five, can you all address, because it's a long question. She wants to know, how do we empower her daughter who's feeling different because of her hair, her skin? I mean, you all are a success. Can you all jump in on that? You all are cultivating quite a bit of this Q&A.
Go ahead, Lori, sorry.
Oh, you're good, you're good.
I've been thinking about the hair thing a lot because sometimes it seems really superficial, and like something that's been talked about too much, or, like, okay, yeah, we have different hair, but I think for Black folks, hair has so much history that I think the only thing that we can do is empower these girls that your hair means more than just like a hairstyle. So, and these are things that just I've learned throughout the years. There's a tribe in Ethiopia and Eritrea called the Tigray. They braid their hair a specific way, and it's a part of their tribe. There's a tribe in Chad. They have a ritual that they moisturize their hair, and it's a lot like wash day for Black folks. So it's like, a direct connection. We braided our hair in maps so we could be free. You know what I mean? This is all history of our hair. So if we just take all of that back, yeah, when you're in the gym, your hair may be different from everybody else's, but know that your hair has so much history and so much power that it doesn't, you don't have to be like, the white girls who can wear a messy bun and it not be a problem, So I think it's tough and it's a hard thing to teach a little person, but if we start empowering them about like our culture, I feel like it would do worlds of difference for us,
Great stuff there. Go ahead, Lori.
Just basically, essentially bouncing off of what you said, hair is such a like an empowering thing, when it's done right. And in the sense of, y'all ever had it where someone's like, whoa, your hair is so different, and it's immediate touch.
Yeah.
And I'm like, like, hold on. Wow, your hair texture is like, I've never seen that before. Can I touch your hair? And I'm like, no. No, you can't touch my hair. And they're like, but your hair is so different. Yes. Yeah, my hair is different. So can I touch it? No. Like, it's happened so many times. And you just know that if, the cards were in reverse, it would cause such a huge issue if I walked up to a white person and said, can I touch your hair? That would explode. That would not.
Or their skin. How about their skin?
Yeah, 100%. And so that's always a very interesting one. And it's like, it comes from a place of, I'm sure for most, I hope for most, just sheer curiosity, but it's kind of like, death by a thousand cuts. The amount of times that, everyone here, I'm sure, can relate to having someone say, can I touch your hair? Or just little microaggressions like that. It's not like that's the first time we hear it. It's multiple times throughout the years. And at some point it's gonna make someone snap, because it hurts. It's a constant reminder that you're different. And, we see a lot in bullying, and especially with younger kids. Like when you see a team in sports, the whole goal is to have this team be unified. We want everyone to unite and to be as one. And I think one of the most common things that can separate kids is race and being Black and being a person of color. And so this person is singled out, and this team wants unity, and they're seeing somebody that looks different, and they're trying to push, them away because they want everybody to be on the same page, and that's racist. So, and it's comes from a lot of kids. And so making sure that we're teaching our kids what the right way to do things is, and also just to be a good person, to not exclude anybody, to accept all, and to be loving to all when they're young, to make sure that it carries on to when they're older is so important.
There's been a boom this year, particularly with our racial reckoning, all the issues in the country with children's books, and I'm just buying them up like they're for free. And they deal with race, and I just want to throw out a citation, which I can get to Carol to blast out, but it's a book you can read in 5 minutes. It's called Can I Touch Your Hair? It's really good. I think it's something we should talk about later. Just listen to all your stories. We should do something like that, or think about it with all the gymnasts, particularly those of color with different issues. So I want to pivot to this, and another important issue is mental health. The number one issue in college athletic departments for student athletes, any academic advisor will tell you, is mental health. How do you think racism and bias affect mental health, or however you all want to tackle this? We know it's been a huge issue.
Definitely, this is something I'm currently working with in sports psychology. This is so big in the field of mental health. Mental health is still a brand new topic to a lot of people, and definitely in our country and around the world. And it seems like it's also a taboo topic as well. Mm-hmm. From the psychological perspective, I really think people are more receptive and acceptive of mental health today than they were a while, in the past. But a lot of people are not familiar how to cope with their own mental health. And so mental health, I believe, that needs to be treated just as much as we treat physical health. It needs to be literally the same thing, because even though physical health, we can give medicine, we can give surgery to fix the problem. Mental health, it takes time. And I don't think a lot of people understand how much time it actually takes. So when it comes to mental health, And racism and bias, it truly affects the athletes, and especially with their performance. And you know, whether it is stress, whether it is anxiety, depression, they cannot focus on their performance. And having the racism, biasism continue to grow, it's only going to get worse for them. And it's something that's been held on to later on in their life, past gymnastics, post gymnastics. And so I really believe that, you know, we continue. I'm seeing USA Gymnastics, I believe they did a mental health initiative not too far ago, back in the summer. I think if we continue to be aware of that and continue to make it not such a taboo topic, but also something that is like, this is normal, you know, this is something that needs to be talked about. But with racism and bias, it, you know, it truly does affect the performance of the athlete and later on in their life as well.
And which is just scratching the surface with the topic being acknowledged. Some high profile athletes had to really come out and not look at it from a deficit perspective. Lori, you kind of had body language. Lori, jump in. It's your dime.
Yeah, I think especially when it comes to mental health, it is, you know, it's still a taboo subject in a lot of areas. And I had worked with a company called I Don't Mind, where the whole phrase is just, I don't mind talking about my mental health. I don't mind sharing. I don't mind being there for you. And they came out with a bunch of t-shirts that say that. And then it starts a conversation. And I remember doing an interview with them. And right before I did the interview, I was talking to my mom about it and saying, you know, I was really worried about oversharing. Where does the lines, like, like, where do I stop? And she said, you know, growing up, mental health was not, it was forbidden. You don't talk about it. She said, especially in my house, it was a blocked off conversation. Like, you don't do it. And she was like, that's one of the reasons why I became a social worker, to see, you know, what was going on in there. And now you have an opportunity to talk about it. So I enforce you to, you know, say as much as you can. And what's tough, and kind of bouncing off of what Jessica said, in the sense that we haven't been taught how to take care of our mental health. We're taught the Pythagorean theorem, you know, we're taught all these subjects, and this is wonderful. But I think being able to add in teaching everybody how to cope with stress, how to cope with depression, how to cope with grief is so important, because those are all things that we're not immune to. We're all going to experience at some point in life, and teaching others how to help it, or how to take care of themselves, is definitely 100% just as important as taking care of the physical.
Related to that, in all that we have to navigate as people of color, sometimes our white American brothers and sisters do not get acknowledged enough for being allies and having that allyship. Can some of you or all of you just share briefly maybe a story about a peer that didn't look like you, or that was specifically white, that helped you navigate this, either with information, mentoring, coaching, etc.?
I mean, honestly, the environment at the University of Oklahoma was very welcome. You know, so much so that they allowed me to address the team on MLK Day. And that was kind of a thing that we did, you know, very welcoming. And, you know, and honestly, I look back on it now and I see how that really gave me confidence, you know, because when you're on a team and, you know, it's really majority white, and you're at a school, you're in college. So sometimes you have your set of team friends that are white, and then you have your campus friends, you know what I mean? Gymnastics by and large isn't a black sport, so to speak, you know, so you don't just get a lot of people gravitating toward that. But I think the environment at the University of Oklahoma was very conducive and very welcoming.
I would just say, on the whole, I have always considered my gymnastics family like my second family. I've always, for the most part, felt very welcomed, very accepted. There's, again, just those microaggressions, and then those just like feelings of inadequacy that kind of come with, you know, not feeling 100% comfortable walking in. But my coaches that I've had, and I've had a few, especially the ones that have taken me through the international ranks and being on national team, John Beck, Mary Swafford, Joy Humanhofer, have been so supportive of me and everything that I wanted to do when it came to my career, and just really did a great job of just ushering me into, you know, everything that comes along with being a top level athlete. So I'm very grateful to them. But I mean, I love my athlete family, my judges, you know, everyone at USA Gymnastics that I've encountered for the most part has been really great to me. So
I would have to agree as well. Within my community, with the acrobatic gymnastics community, they have been nothing but a supportive, loving community. And I've never, ever felt left out, if that makes sense. Meaning like, you know, yes, it was obvious with my skin color, but they never made me feel like I was because of my skin color, if that makes sense. So I've had a lot of supportive people at the gym that I grew up with, and also just again, you know, different judges or just different things. And so I would have to say it's been a positive experience for me. But I know I have talked to some athletes and former athletes, it has not been the best experience for them. And so, you know, and I really want that experience to also, and I think we could all agree, the same for all athletes in the future, particularly, you know, particularly with this topic, feeling supported, feeling loved, and that's just something I just like have to share. And particularly with my acrobatic gymnastics community, it really is just a big family, and I'm really proud to be a part of that. So
That's what it's about. That's great. Well, you know, we have time for a couple more areas before we close out. So when we think about, we've tried kind of everything in America. We tried, I'd say the last decade or so, the rhetoric that we're post-racial in this postmodern society. Clearly that's not the case. So on the positive, think about how some folks resist from discussing what we're discussing, and we've been discussing it almost an hour. So what I want to throw out to each of you is, when we think about the future of diversity, equity, inclusion, race relations, in light of everything that has happened lately, is the way I will frame it. What do y'all think the impact's going to be on race relations in terms of our change of leadership? At least it appears to what's going to happen, the change of leadership at our Oval Office. How do you think all of this will impact race relations, and how do we move forward? I know for me to share with everyone out there listening, I made a new commitment, and we've heard, you know, you don't need to speak to the choir. I want to talk with people that have a different view than me. Whatever it may be, I'm gonna have a conversation. The people with a like view, I don't think it's doing us as good as it can. So I wanted to set that up. You know, what are we gonna do? Because I want us to live in a better world. We all do.
I saw, Orson, you took your mute off. Were you gonna say something? No? I have something to say.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Darren. Say it. You're good.
The shy one. I love it.
If we don't say all of the words, all of the things that need to be said without using like catchphrases, I don't think anything's gonna change. We're staying really comfortable, you know, like we're saying these things, and I know that we have to use words because words mean things, and that's how we get points across, you know. But if we're not allowed to specifically say, like, this isn't working for Black people, you know, or this isn't working for brown people, and this is why, and actually have people listen to us and not feel like we're just whining, or that we're talking about privilege, because, you know, folks don't want to hear that. If those things don't change, I don't think the race relations are going to get better. So honestly, like, I know that there's always work on our end to do, like as far as Black and brown folks, but I feel like the work is the ball's in the other court, you know, like white folks need to be intentional about that work. That's my opinion.
Well, you use those words. You cut to the chase. Thank you, Darren. Others, because we'll probably have to end with this question. So y'all each want to address it.
Let me say this, despite who's the president, I think it's my personal responsibility to affect my community for change in that area. As an owner of a gym that, has, a little over 1,000 athletes, one of my missions is to educate our athletes and make them aware of diversity in this country, because I know for some of them, I may be the only Black person that they even know, So we're very intentional at the gym and talking about issues like this. So my approach is really honestly, and like you, Dr. Harrison, I mean, I'm more than welcome to talk to people that may have different views than I do, because I think that's where you learn. That's where you make up middle ground, But regardless of who the president is, my thought is that I have to affect my own community, for a positive change. I have to do that myself.
Outstanding. And that includes speaking to quote unquote our own homogeneous groups wherever we fall.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, just going to, and I'll be specific, a Black barbershop, 20 different points of views, or beauty shop.
Absolutely. That's right.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I think, when it comes to leadership, I mean, we would really hope that the people in office, that of course they would be show full diversity and inclusion. But I believe the real change starts in our own communities, our own cities. That's where that change is actually going to occur. And of course, having these conversations. And again, and it's like, how do we have these conversations? How do we take these ideas and put it to action? And so one of the things with improving diversity and inclusion, especially within our sport and gymnastics, I think it would be great if we have an athlete council. I'm not sure if we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion council. That could be something that council can truly focus on and brainstorm and actually make those ideas more represented and all people represented, because pushing forth these ideas is going to take time. It's going to take time to put these ideas into words or actions. And so this representation of putting forth all the groups of race, gender, people with disabilities, religion, social economics, I feel like a council or committee like that, at least within our gymnastics community, can really push forward with that and really truly make those changes. And so I do believe that's how those are ways to at least get started within our own community or gymnastics community.
Absolutely. I know we need to come to you in a minute or two. You okay, Carol? Okay.
I would say that, simply put, the best thing that we can do as people is treat others as you would want to be treated. And that's, again, very simple. And it's a lot of, there's a lot of meaning to it. But at the same time, it is very simple. But I have always tried to make sure as a coach, as an athlete, as a judge, is to remember that athletes be not just good athletes, be good people. Because one day you're not going to be an athlete anymore. And one day you're going to have to live in this world and do all the things that everyone else does. So if you want to, continue to live this good life and to be a part of the community, you have to treat the community the same way that you want to be treated. And I think if we can, build upon something that's so simple and so basic, I think that the world can heal, and our country especially can heal from all that's been going on, especially just within the last, few years or so.
I'm glad we're all optimistic. I am too.
Yeah, I just think that making sure that we're having those conversations, especially within our communities, is so important. Because, of course, there's a lot of talk on social media of don't be shy, spark the conversation, versus actually doing it. It's very important. And especially like within the Latino community, there's a lot of racism between like, okay, I have Black roots versus like, no, I have none of that. And then also acknowledging like, my skin is lighter, but I'm Afro-Latina, but I have privilege. But acknowledging the roots is so important because it's where I come from. But I have also like a friend of mine who is like, homegirl's Black. Like her skin is darker than mine, you know, and I think we've had multiple conversations about the fact that her parents told her that she doesn't have any Black in her. And she identifies as Puerto Rican. She's Latina. And, you know, we've talked about that and just how interesting that was for her. And she was like, I don't think that's right. And that's definitely a form of racism that happens really often within the Latino community. And yeah, just making sure that we can talk about that and we can dismantle it. And there's also like that code of like, all right, we can argue about like, I like watermelon, you don't like watermelon. I think penguins look better as like pink. You might think penguins look better as purple. But if we argue about whether or not watermelons exist, then like that's a false argument because it's a fact that watermelons exist. Same kind of concept of when we're talking about race and we're talking about things that hurt us. It's not an argument of like, does it exist? Does it not? It's just making sure that both sides, but especially when we're speaking up, that the other side is receptive to what we're saying and that they can welcome it and that they can really hear it. And you know, not lash back. If we're acknowledging it, it's because it hurts. And it's not an opinion. It's fact that it's existed for centuries, and making sure that the other side is open to receiving that is very important.
My good friend Jamel Hill often says, there's things, to your point, Lori, we don't want to be right about in terms of person of color. We like to be wrong about it and it be corrected. So, you know, to quote my grandmother before we turn it to Carol, you don't want to make people glad twice when you're visiting. Glad to see you come and glad to see you go. We are 3 minutes within our time frame. So, Carol, did you want to take the mic?
The only thing I want to say is thank you to the whole panel for showing up and doing this today. Like Darren mentioned, it's a lot to put words to some of these issues, and especially in such a public way. It's brave and it's vulnerable, and I think the whole community is better because you're willing to do that. So thank you for doing it. And I'm sorry that we don't have more time to keep going on these issues. We have more panels that we're excited about and hope to keep discussing all of these things. So thank you again for your willingness and your bravery.
And you all were outstanding. I can't believe I got to moderate this group. Big five on them.
Thank you all.
Dr. Harrison.
Hey, y'all, and Darren, I've never done anything my whole life or career where someone said, I'm gonna put you on blast in a positive way, that you're nervous and we couldn't stop you and you were great.
Yes.
Can you cut that part out, Carol?
Probably. Yeah.
You were great, Darren, seriously, all of you.